Hi everyone, welcome to this stage 2 of my epic Wales trip, where if you're listening if through audio you won't necessarily see the map, but if you've got the video you'll see the map of the next few places that I went to visit. And I decided to create this video because a lot of the videos on YouTube are of the scenery, of the landscape, of the sea, of the actual road trip itself, and just sharing with you what I discover. I don't take too many sort of recordings of those places because I think it's nice to be surprised when you go on your own road trip. And so I was just motivated to explore a different part of the UK that I hadn't been to. And I've been it's been one surprise after another actually, all the different places that I've been to in Wales so far. So I'm going to talk about different landscapes, the way that I experience it. So as I wrote in my master's a while back, this is about changing spaces and how you feel in different spaces. And what I notice about the place, because when you're new, you have that first impression. And also the different feelings that are evoked in you, as well as the deeper sort of dive I've been doing into the history of the people. And the people I want to give a nod to, or more than a nod, of actually celebrating the lives of those that came before us, our grandparents, our great-grandparents and beyond, people who cultivated the land, worked in the shipyards, the dockyards, the coal mines, in the shops, the local people, and some of the things that influenced changes in society. And so I've been looking at those on a deeper level. I look through things through different lenses, a spiritual lens, through the desire for empowerment of everybody, of equality, of celebrating our difference, and also through some of the things that are often seen as outside of our control or that we're not even aware of. So I'm going to pull up the map just to show you the visual of where I went and some of the bits of info about those places. So if you've been to any of the places that I've been to, it'd be great to hear your impression, of that place, what was evoked in you. Because I might look also at some of the deeper sort of feelings that were evoked me different places that I went to. So I'm having trouble pulling that back up now. Let's look at the map. Okay, so I think, yes, I've got the map up. So in the first leg of the journey, I talked about visiting Portishead and Clevedon, and that I've been to Clifton prior, but also the way that the economic influence and the industry that has existed well over the last 100 years. I wanted to spend a bit of time in Bristol, but I think I'll go there at the later leg of this trip. So the next step that I went to was Newport, and I was actually going to spend some time in Newport, but I've spoke about that actually on the other video about what that felt like. So in terms of the influence of Newport, I talked about how it had originally been a modest medieval town, as lots of villages and towns were before sort of the Romans came in and the Normans came in and started systemizing and creating the foundations for what it became, and how Newport became then the biggest coal exporter, sending wealth and human labour all around the world. And in particular, the different groups of people that have taken a stand over the different decades. And I didn't realise it went so far back in 1839 when we looked at the Newport Rising. And as the photography exhibition showcased in Margate, the different human uprisings that have occurred over the last 100 years, and about the stand that people were taking and what they were fighting for. And this isn't about sitting on any side of a fence about whether I think someone's right or wrong and judging people through the lens of polarity. This is just about talking about people of both upper class, working class, and poor working class backgrounds, and the backgrounds that I came from. So my history interweaves in and out of the things that I discover as well. So we moved from Newport, and I started moving further down towards, where did I go next? So I went to Cardiff. I wasn't sure about going to a city because there's so much to see in cities. So I decided to park at Cardiff Bay at a lovely little church, which was called the Norwegian Church Arts Centre. So that was lovely. Will that come up on the picture? Yes, so that's the picture, and I've taken some pictures of that on my camera. So that sits at Cardiff Bay, and there's a car park right near there that you can go and then walk around Cardiff Bay. And I got an open top bus just near there at Cardiff Bay, and the open top bus took me all around the main sites. So I'm not going to talk about those main sites here because I've captured those on the Cardiff video that I've got on the YouTube page. So let's have a look at what happened, what I wanted to find out about Cardiff. So as I said, I really am quite interested in how these cities were created, and Cardiff Bay looks very new. There's a lot of new building that's gone on there, as it has in Portsmouth and some other old port towns. So Cardiff was more transformed in the 1830s by the Industrial Revolution, and canals at first, and then docks, built by the powerful Bute family, and that sort of hit me between the eyes that when I saw the name, because my mum is from Bute in Scotland, and from Rossi, the island of from Rossi on the island of Bute. So when I saw the Bute family, it sort of took those two worlds sort of collided in that moment, and I thought that's really strange because I'm planning on going up to Scotland and looking deeper into my family history and DNA. So the coal from South Wales valleys flooded into that port, turning it into the world's largest coal export hub by the 1900s. The coal exchange in Mount Stuart Square was where the global deals for Welsh coal were struck. So there is a lot of grandeur in Cardiff. I was struck by how clean it was as well. So I think it's a fairly beautiful city, and there were parts of it that actually reminded me of some parts of Rome. So I haven't dug into the history of the individual buildings yet. I'm going to have a bit of a dive into that, because there was something very similar about how I felt when I was on an open top bus in Rome and some parts of Cardiff. I think it was when I went past the museum and the courts. So around the docks was Bluetown or Tiger Bay, and became a multicultural melting pot with sailors and dock workers from Norway, Spain, the Caribbean and Ireland, blending into working class cosmopolitan world. Up to 50 nationalities converged there on a daily basis. The Seven Estuary Partnership and Cardiff Harbour Authority on Mermaid Quay. So after World War II, the docks declined, coal export crashed in the 1960s, and the city's wealth rapidly faded. By the 1980s, much of the waterfront lay derelict until Cardiff Bay Development Corporation began the regeneration in the 80s, culminating in dramatic building of Europe's largest tidal barrage, transforming mudflats into now touristic waterfront around Mermaid Quay. So that's where where the bus actually went through as well. I didn't really like Mermaid Quay, and I don't like Portsmouth Bay that much either, because there's lots of flats and houses built, but I couldn't see any maybe they're in there, some halls where people go and meet, where a community spend time together. There were bars and restaurants, but not so much shops. So it's all about having the money to spend, the money to hang around in those places. Whereas, flats that were built years ago, often there was a church, there would be a community hall, there would be small shop holders. So it might be being unfair, but that was my first experience. So there's lots of contrast really in Cardiff Bay for me as well, in terms of the coal forge wealth, alongside dock workers' hardship, sweat and smoke under opulent ceilings. And reminds me of Sugarman, who I think he worked in Chicago, and Chicago being an industry around the car industry, and how drab and grey and bleak it kind of looked in his story as well about his life, because he was an undiscovered or a discovered musician, but he didn't know he'd been discovered in South Africa. That was an amazing film about Sugarman. And inheritance, the gentry built the city grounded in extraction uh, and neighbourhood shaped by global migration and labour, not by inheritance. So the land really became a symbolic reclamation when they built the barrage, the mud industry, and memory transformed into leisure and imagined prosperity. And that's kind of what I felt. It's like on the shop front, it looked very clean and nice, very nice shop fronts and writing, but not the soul in that you get in other places that you go to. Like when I've gone to Portobello Market, that is a mixture of where they say some areas have been gentrified, but you can feel the working class, the poor, and the gentry all there. Do they all live happily together? Who knows? But it's got a vibe of soul and community there. And also underneath that, we've got Ronald Dahl's Norwegian Church, now a creative hub, a flutter between heritage, diaspora, and forgetting. And it's just worth noting that in Cardiff and Cardiff Bay, every time an area is regenerated, it either glosses over or just, puts more soil over what would have been what the Romans left and the Normans left, because they had a massive influence on these cities. And that was led by Robert Fitzhamon, who built Mott and Bailey Castle atop the Roman fort, establishing Cardiff as the administrative seat of Marcher Lordship of Glamorgan. So again, land was distributed, and the landlords, the lords, were then able to build these very grandiose castles, forts, and houses that they lived in. There's a stone 12-sided Norman keep still landing today atop the High Mott. Was erected in the 12th century by Robert of Gloucester and served as a prison of the Duke Robert of Normandy. Throughout the 13th and 14th centuries, families like de Clares and Despenser dynasty expanded and fortified Cardiff Castle, consolidating power and imposing Norman dominance deep into the Welsh land. So prior to that, prior to Christianity, like a lot of other areas, people lived happily in their communities, supporting each other, and until people started deciding who owned what and how it was distributed. So it was repeatedly attacked at Cardiff under the Welsh revolts, including Owain Glyndwr's uprising in 1404. Sorry if I'm hacking these pronunciations apart. When the town was burned, 3 episodes reflected layered conflict between the Welsh resistance and Norman authority. And you can kind of understand why, can't you? You're living happily in your green pastures and sowing your fields and tending to sheep and cows. And somebody comes along and just tells you that things have got to be different. So there will always be a resistance to change, and not all change is good, and change doesn't always serve the many, it just serves the few. So standing on the moat at Cardiff Castle, I felt the geometry of conquest, the double walls, the Roman base, the normal shell, the Victorian embellishment, all stacking purposely on top of each other. Each era is imprinted here like sediment in the land. I remembered my own internal castles, walls I built against grief, identity, and belonging. And in another video, I'm going to talk about identity, belonging, and all those themes that were stirred and really I dived in deep when I was writing my master's. So I often wonder who gets buried beneath the new reigns of power. Who do we become when we are trying to survive? Cardiff Bay may look modern now, but underneath the regeneration lives the ancient impulse: build over, forget, and start again. And those words really resonate with when you work for a local authority, which I did. I was part of a huge national transformation program that came in around 2002-3, and I was doing a very small project, working for what was the behaviour department. Every local authority had a education department, and in that several different departments. And I worked for the behaviour department as a therapist, going in school on a very small project. And then I was asked to do this transition project where basically there were kids at risk of being kicked out of school, and they wanted to try and put the right kind of support in place. They were starting to realise through some of the research that there was a lot of kids who were struggling with things at home, anxiety, death of parents, or things going on at home, that created stress and worry. And don't know why there's loads of spaces in this car park, and it's coming to park near me. So this program came in, and it was it was financed nationally with this aim to identify these kids in each of the primary schools and work with them. And what I quickly discovered is the program was aimed at the kids who were about to go to secondary school, which is 11. So they would have been in year 6. And by year 6, if a young person, it doesn't take many of us to work it out, if a young person's had lots of problems in the last few years of school, it takes a while to undo any of the damage that's been done, regardless of whether that's been done at home or in school, because I did meet an array of teachers that either weren't really teaching kids well, or some that were actually brutish and bullyish from some of the old paradigms of school teaching. But it was the same sort of thing. That money was given for 3 years, and after the 3 years we put a lot of effort into identifying the children, creating a plan, and the plans take at least a year to set up for the following year. So in the first term, you're only really just starting to identify kids and have the conversations, and then you find your feet in the school, you get a place to work, and you start doing some of that work, and then you're reviewing how that's going. And so it takes a while for any project to really take hold, unless it's a project you've been running over and over again and you're just tweaking. And this is what this sort of reminds me of, in a way, these visits around these areas. When you look at, first of all, the Romans came in, and then the Normans, and then these families are given pieces of land, and with the agreement of the Parliament, that was created and didn't have the voice of the people. And that's what the Chartists was standing up for, really. And there probably were Chartists around the world. Let me have a quick check on that. Okay, so the Chartists was a movement for political reform in the United Kingdom that erupted from 1838 to 1857. It's strongest in 1839, 1842, and 1848. So it took its name from the People's Charter. So basically, it was about working class people having a voice for the first time, because prior to this, people worked on the land of the lords they were serfs, and some landlords might be generous with their prosperity and other landlords weren't. And so they lived in either abject poverty or struggle, and everybody lived in the manor house and ate really well. And we've seen that if we go and look at any of the National Trust buildings. And I guess I do have a thing about how much is scraped from people who hardly have anything, and given to those who have a lot. and that still plays out in politics. So the Chartist movement was really about starting to address how working people who depended on single industries were subject to wild swings in economic activity. So they were less strong in places like Bristol that had more diversified economies. And the movement was fiercely opposed by the government authorities. And as I spoke about in the first video, those that stood up, actually in one of those places got open fired on, and those that lived transported to Australia. So the threat was huge, death or deportation. Um, and the support for the movement then was highest when petitions were signed by millions of working people who presented to the House of Commons. And the strategy employed was to use the scale of support which these petitions and accompanying mass meetings demonstrated to put the pressure on the politicians to concede male suffrage. Chartism relied on constitutional methods to secure its aims through what some became involved in insurrectionary activities, notably in South Wales and in Yorkshire. So there was a movement starting where people started to learn what their rights were and how hard they were working for very little and how much they still suffered, and how, 1 week you might not have work. It's a bit like now, if you look at what went on with the Uber drivers. No contracts, no sick pay, no holiday pay. Everybody's working massive hours. I mean, I don't think we've gone forward. I think we've gone back. We've got this huge entrepreneurial community now that equally has no right to anything. And if the work doesn't come in, you don't eat. So the People's Charter called for 6 reforms to make political systems more democratic. So they wanted a vote for every man aged 21 years and above, of sound mind, not ongoing punishment for a crime. The secret ballot to protect the elector in the exercise of his vote. No property qualification for members of parliament. So that meant that that'd be wider. If you weren't only a landlord, you could then qualify to be a member of parliament. Payments of members enabling tradesmen, working men and other persons of modest means to leave or interrupt their livelihood to attend the interests of the nation. Equal constituencies securing the same amount of representation for the same number of electors. So this is a very early movement, and eventually Chartism did die out, but massively impacted the changes in life from then. So Britain adopted all but the last of the 6 reforms. Chartists saw themselves fighting against political corruption for democracy in an industrial society, but attracted support beyond the radical political groups for economic reasons, such as opposing wage cuts and unemployment. So there's a lot more about the history in the Reform Act, and we've had several changes to that. At that time, it failed to extend the vote for those owning property. Political leaders of the working class made speeches claiming that there had been a great act of betrayal. This sense that the working class had been betrayed by the middle class was strengthened by the actions of the Whig government in 1930s. Notably, the hated Newport Law Amendment was passed in 1834, depriving working people of outdoor relief and driving the poor into workhouses where families and for particular things. Has some of the others will make people so. There was a saying a few weeks ago, it's like we'll make people so distracted and happy that they've just become passive recipients of their own life. Anyway, Barry and Barry Island, from world's coal capital to family nostalgia. So the historical pulse. Barry was quiet until the late 19th century, when industrialists, fed up with Cardiff's monopolies, created Barry Railway and Docks. By 1913, Barry had exported more coal than Cardiff, making it one of the largest coal export ports in the world. Can you believe that? Didn't realise that until the other day. The population exploded in 500 people in 1881 to over 38,000 by 1914, as workers flooded from Ireland, Scandinavia, and across the valleys. Barry Island became a working-class seaside resort, Butlins camp, pleasure park, Shorelines filled with thousands of coal miners on holiday. By the 60s and 70s, still the heart of affordable family escapes. Then industry collapsed. The docks languished. Today, Barry Island remains nostalgic, hosting pleasure park and pop culture tourism like Gavin and Stacey, which revived local pride but didn't resolve the structural decay. So Barry symbolises both global impact, the coal export, and intimate respite for working class holiday memories. I think similar to Blackpool, because I know Brighton was where the middle and upper classes went, same as Eastbourne. Displacement and decline from industrial crescendo to spiritual dormitory. Its soul buffeted by forced change and rebranding. Cultural reclamation shows like Gavin and Stacey resurrect public vision, but may also flatten real histories and labour, migration and loss. Or comfort versus closure, the nostalgia can feel like healing, or like nostalgia masking dispossibility. So in Barry, children of coal valley miners used to paddle on buses to laughter and sunshine. Later, the docks receded and the coal ended and the new homes rose where chalets once stood. It's nostalgia led on industry. Where does memory end and myth begin? I felt Barry's pulse in both sunlit joy and quietly fading stories of those who built the place and were forgotten long before the sitcom wrote its lines. Barry was originally the domain of St. Barrack Island, and native chapel became politically framed under the Barry family controlling the Norman reorganisation in post-11th century. Barry Castle, built in 12th century, was fortified by William de Barry, evolved into a courtyard castle of stone, surviving through destruction during Llewellyn Bren's 1316 revolt. So from the chapel to castle, an island sacred to a Welsh saint became ground for Norman dominance, faith displaced by fortification, cycles of rebellion, Welsh revolts punctuated Norman rule, but structures, literal and social, survived and evolved. So the remaining gatehouse and walls of Barry Castle stand not in grandeur, but in the quiet persistence. They echo displacement, not renovation. Barry Castle is less of a fortress than a weathered witness, modest stone walls whispering unknowable pain. I felt close to tears walking through this crumbling gatehouse here in both conquest and reclamation, faith disrupted, but ancestral spirits folded into the land, but also quiet joy of seeing the families enjoying an ice cream and walking over the sand towards the sea. I had mixed feelings about Barry, behind the noise of the penny slots and the ghost train, something more sits behind all of that, doesn't it? Moments of pleasure over the life of what life you've got, what life have you got, how are you living your life, who are you, what is your history, how do you spend pleasure time and outside of working hard. So I did do a bit of a deep dive because I needed to revisit a bit of the history to understand how the UK was influenced by, the Romans coming in around 43 AD. And they eventually took over Wales by 78 AD, and there was fierce resistance from the native tribes. So they built the roads, the towns, and the forts, and their presence lasted 400 years but never fully dissolved the tribal identity of the Welsh. And then the Normans, originally Norse Vikings, settled in northern France in the 10th century and over time adopted the French language and feudal customs. So in 1066, William the Conqueror led the Norman conquest to England. By the late 11th century, they pushed into Wales, erecting castles and establishing the marcher lordships along the borderlands. Their strategy wasn't just military, it was administrative, spiritual, church building, and cultural language suppression. What they brought: feudal land holding, castles, Latin Christian bureaucracy, centralised taxation. And what they displaced: indigenous tribal law, oral traditions, sacred land ties, and matrilineal memory in some zones. So I was kind of pondering on, when change happens, is it a good change and who's it good for? You know? So I don't know, because clearly change is always changing. You know, the Romans were here for 400 years and massively created the infrastructure, and then we had all the churches built, and Christianity came in, and everyone was told to change their beliefs and stop doing some of the things that they wanted to do, or they do something different. So, you know, is change always good, and is the latest idea for the benefit of many or just for the benefit of a few? I'll leave you to decide that one, I think. So let's look at the map. Where did I get to? I've lost my map. There it is. Okay. So, oops. Let's make that a little bit smaller. You can see that I went to Barry, and Barry is here. And there's the docks. There's the pleasure island. Cold Nut Beach. And the Atlantic Trading Estate. So the other thing I wanted to nod towards, not go deep in this video, it's meant to be the joy of traveling through all these beautiful places, which I am. And I found the Welsh people, dog playing in the water, Welsh people really lovely. And there's just something so chilled with every area that I've gone to, even though I've felt different in different places. So the invasions did not end with sword or quill, which was the old writing implement prior to pens. Their echo persists in the present day legal fiction systems, wherein you are treated as a corporate entity, not a sovereign breath. Law is interpreted as control, not coherence, and land is commodified rather than sung to. So what that means is, you know, governments just treat us as corporate entities, individual businesses that they can make money from. And whether or not you think that's going down the conspiracy theorist or not, it's not. You just need to do a bit of homework to see what that means and what your birth certificate means when you look that up. So let's journey together through the next places that I found. The harmonic tapestry of Sundersfoot and Tenby, two beloved coastal communities along the Pembrokeshire coastline, woven through time with shifting laws, sacred architecture, and evolving spirit. So let's see if I can pull up some pictures on the map, because I really liked Saundersfoot. I travelled from Barry Island through, where did I go? I went through the very these roads round Cardiff Airport, and went through all the little villages. Oh yes, I went to Lanwick Major Beach first. That was lovely. I think that, yes, I did, and there was a cafe there. And see if that comes up. Is it that one? Getting the names of the places that I visited. So that was a lovely visit, and I was near. I stayed at a campsite just near there, and had a couple of nights there. It was really nice campsite. And I didn't decide that day till late where I was going to go, and that's kind of what has happened to me on and off. I've not really had a plan. I looked at the map and thought of all the places I'd like to visit, and then I get to some of those places and decide then not to stay, and I think I'm staying longer. So I've not really been booking accommodation, as in because I've got the camper van, but you're not allowed to stay in most car parks, which I find absolutely ridiculous. There's loads of car parks on the coastline, and you can't stay overnight, so you have to find a campsite. Some people might be able to find wild spaces, but you know, as a woman traveling alone still in a camper van, you have to be very mindful. So before I got there, I went to Ogmore by Sea, which was a very pretty seaside town, and lots of cafes and hotels on the front. It's not showing them on that picture. Maybe it'll show on where the Welsh Coffee Company is. But they've got loads of hotels on the front there. It's really nice. It's showing it on that one. Might do. So that was a beautiful place to stop off and just have a moment by the sea and have a coffee. And then I decided to go further up and went to Porthcrawl, which is a beach and also a little town. And Porthcrawl was absolutely beautiful. You can see it there. Okay, so Porthcrawl is a town and community in Bridgend in South Wales and is located 25 miles from Cardiff. Historically part of Glamorgan, situated on low limestone headstone on South Wales coast, overlooking the Bristol Channel. It developed as a coal port as well during the 19th century, but its trade was soon taken over more rapidly developing ports such as Barry. Northwest of the town, in the dunes known as Kenfig Burrows, lies the remains of Kenfig Castle. So Porth is a common Welsh element meaning harbour, and Call refers to sea kale, which may have grown in profusion or even collected then. So now it's a holiday resort in South Wales and mostly large static caravan park on Treco Bay. It's got a grand pavilion, a museum, 3 golf courses, and a site of the former Black Obelisk. In 1887, to commemorate Queen Victoria Golden Jubilee, Porthcrawl's promenade runs along the seafront from Lochs Common to west of the harbour before joining the eastern promenade. And I've got a video that I took on YouTube where I'm driving through Porthcrawl. I only stayed there for a little while, but it's lovely. It's a place I'd definitely go to again. So the harbour wasn't built until 1995, and situated near the harbour is the Atlantic class lifeboat. Cozy Corner is a park area, and over the years has housed a theatre, cinema, roller skating rink, and ballroom. Jennings Building, built in 1832, is a Grade 2 listed building and Wales' oldest maritime warehouse. The building was identified as potentially important faculty as part of Porthcrawl regeneration strategy. It houses 3 hospitality businesses. So at the end of Porthcrawl stands a lighthouse built in 1860 as a navigational aid. It was the last coal and gas-powered lighthouse in the United Kingdom, switched to being powered by North Sea gas in 1974, before electric in 97. So, yeah, very lovely place to go. Very pretty to go for a holiday with the family. Yeah, I'd definitely go there. There are festivals in Porthcrawl town. The carnival takes place in July, and the Jazz and Blues Festival held in April, hosting musical performances. Surf Cult runs a week in September. Events such as surf contest, music, art, and fashion. And the Elvis Festival runs every September, attracting Elvis Presley tribute acts. So that's fascinating, isn't it? So that's Porthcrawl. And then I took myself further down towards, let's come out there. So I decided to go to Port Talbot. Next is Port Talbot. Okay, so the next place was Port Talbot. And Port Talbot, let's pull that up so you can see more. Losing Google Maps. There it is. That's how it looked. So, yeah, I came up towards Port Talbot, and basically it's like other ports, you know, very industrialized. It looked very grey on the day that I was going through, and I was just interested. But it's interesting because I was trying to find the town when I drove through there, just have a look around, and I couldn't. I just kept on going round in these circles, so I gave up in the end. But Port Talbot was steelworks and covers a large area of land, dominating the southeast of town. And it's the largest steelwork in the United Kingdom, one of the largest in the world, and was under the threat of closure since the 1980s. The population is 31,000 in 2021, comprising about a fifth of the population in Neath in Port Talbot. Modern Port Talbot town formed the merging of multiple villages, including Baglan, Margam, and Aberafan. The name Port Talbot appears in 1837, the name of the new docks built on the southeast side of the River Arfan by the Talbot family. Over time, it came to be applied to the whole of the emerging area. The earliest evidence of humans in Port Talbot has been found on the side of Myned Margam, where Bronze Age farming ditches can be found. 4000 BC, there was an Iron Age hill fort and in the nearby hills. So there's also early Christian sculptured stones that stands on the Church of St. Catherine at Baglan and is intricately sculptured cross slab of a Latin cross and inscription recalling Bancroft. Originally, it stood in the old St. Baglan's church but fell into ruin in the late 19th century and the slab was removed. So the English antiquarian John Leyland made an extensive journey through Wales in 1536, where he recorded an itinerary. He passed through Aberfan, which he describes as a poor village surrounded by barren ground. So besides the steelworks and how the villages were turned into Port Talbot, there are some interesting facts about it as well. Fertile ground for movie stars. Former residents included Anthony Hopkins, Richard Burton, and Ronald Lewis. There's a South Wales Miners Museum and Margam Stones Museum, which has the early Christian inscribed stones in there. The Baked Bean Museum of Excellence, a Banksy mural. Artist Banksy in 2018 confirmed that he'd produced the mural painted on the corner of the garage close to Port Talbot Steelworks. And The Passion, the Gospel of Us, was led a 72-hour National Theatre Wales production of modern retelling of the Passion. The play began on Good Friday on the seafront, inspired by John the Baptist's baptism of Jesus, which watched by hundreds who heard about it by word of mouth. It also serves several independent local radio stations: Hits Radio South Wales, Greatest Hits Radio South Wales, Swansea Bay Radio, Hearts South Wales, Nation Radio Wales, and Talbot Hospital in Baglan Moors. So it's got things there to visit. I didn't spend much time there. I drove through, and I guess I was more reminded of when I went to Glasgow, and Glasgow being a massive shipworks port for many years, and one of my uncles worked on the steel and shipworks over there, and so again, it's making that connection with there were people in your family. You know, when you make that connection of they would have been coming back at the end of the day, and they would have been going to these workers' unions and having these conversations about work and money and struggle. You know, going back to Sugar Man, his whole life was struggle until he found out that he was a massive artist in South Africa, and any proceeds to his albums had been dwindled away by a dodgy record. I don't know if it was the record company manager or just the record company, but you know how the fate of your life lands in the hands of a few sometimes. So let's go on to the next leg of the journey, which took me to Tenby and Saundersfoot. So let's pull up Tenby. So like I said, you can have a look on the YouTube videos where I've recorded Tenby. I really enjoyed my time at Tenby, actually. I did go to Swansea, and again was just surprised at how clean it was. But I did want to do another city tour, so I moved further down, and I was getting quite tired that day. I've been doing a lot of walking, and I went to Mumbles. So here is Mumbles. It's on the edge of the Swansea coast, and it's absolutely lovely. So I took some videos of that as well. But you can walk, the bay is huge, and you can walk right around the bay, and they've got several bars and the lighthouse at the end. But it's a really nice place to go. Didn't have a huge array of shops, but plenty of little bars and stuff on the front. So I hung around there for a few hours and had a really nice pint of lager, which is nice on a hot day in Mumbles. So that was definitely worth a visit. And then made my way. That was it. Then I went to the next campsite and spent time in Oxwich. So the campsite overlooks Oxwich Bay. So I've moved down from Swansea to Oxwich Bay and got a campervan space there, which was right at the top of the cliff. And they said, oh, it's just a few steps down to the bay, which is lovely. People surfing on there. It was a really, really hot day. I took the van down because it wasn't a few steps and it was incredibly steep. So that area is not great if you've got mobility issues, but it is a beautiful bay and they've got a cafe on there. So it's definitely worth a visit. So I spent a couple of days down there on Oxford Bay, and I was going to go across to Rhossili because Rhossili is also one of the best beaches in Wales, I think it's known as. Absolutely beautiful, but I didn't want to go backtrack on myself, so Rhossili is saved because, as you can see, is after being in Oxwich, what I actually did is I drove up this way at the back on the back roads. Actually, I didn't take the route that it's showing you now, up towards Crofty, which is right on the coast. So I drove down that promenade road and then into Penclad, and then decided to do a bit of a detour. And I was going to spend some time in Llanelli, but I got there. I don't know why I thought it was going to be really nice. I got there, it was so quiet. It was like a ghost town. It was a Friday. Nothing was open. I mean, it was about 9 o'clock in the morning. Reminded me of Kent on a Monday and Tuesday, actually, because a lot of Whitstable and Herne Bay closes the shops on a Monday and Tuesday. It's not much open. So I went to Llanelli thinking I was going to stay there for a couple of days, and stayed for a few hours. And I met someone in one of the pubs last night down in Liscard where I've been staying, and he said there's a meme on Instagram that shows, I think it's the lion. Oh, that's it, the Lion King, and he's saying to his son in the famous scene, pointing at Llanelli, "Don't go there." So we laughed because he's a local, and he was telling me, "No, don't go to Llanelli," which is not fair. And I haven't done any sort of historical checks on it, because I couldn't find any sense of identity. The beach, it's nice, but it was so quiet, so barren in a way. So that was my experience of Glen. Okay, I changed my mind and decided to do a little bit of digging into Llanelli. So the beginnings of Llanelli can be found on the lands of the present-day Park Howard. The Iron Age hill fort once stood, which was called Bryn Carew. Evidence suggests that there were 5 hill forts from the old road to Dimpath during the Roman conquest of Wales. It is unknown whether the area was part of the Silures tribe or the Damate tribe, which is the very early tribes, pre-Romans and Normans. But there's evidence of a Roman camp near the St. Ely shopping centre, and it's unknown when that was built. It was completely abandoned shortly after construction, either due to the Romans thinking the area was completely worthless or due to a raid by either rebellious local Britons or Irish raid. During the post-Roman period, the area may have been heavily populated with pagans, and there's evidence of pagan worship temple under the St. Ely church. It may have had frequent raids from Dyfed in order to Christianise the area, which would eventually fall into Dyfed. During the early medieval period, it's said that Saint Ely, who is a legend, is a son or daughter of King Brychan, established a church on the banks of the Afon Liadi. I'm butchering the pronunciation of this, I'm aware of that. So, according to the Red Book of Hergest, during the Norman invasion of Wales, the allegiance of all the Welsh in the kingdom of Dyfed, apart from one region, would not pay allegiance. Thus, his uncle attacked and pillaged the area, moving on to attack the castles of Narberth. At this time, there was a lot of revolts in the area, and it was industrialised in the 19th century as a global centre for tin plate production. Lying near the western fringe of South Wales is the coalfield. Llanelli played an important role in the industry, exported through 3 small docks, along with copper and tin produced in the town itself. So the Stepney family and other prominent families, including the Raby family, Howard family, and Cowell family, played an important role in the development of the town, or the not so much of development of the town now. It's renowned for its pottery, a unique cockerel hand painting on each item. The collection of this pottery can be seen at the museum. People are sometimes nicknamed Turks. There are several theories, and the nickname allowed the docking of a Turkish ship when Swansea dockers were on strike in the 1920s. Llanelli tinplate workers wrapped their heads like turbans to deal with the sweat, or as reference to the 4th Battalion of the Welsh Regiment fighting in the Ottoman Empire. So we're not sure which one's true. So manufacturers linked to the steel, coal, and the tin. And there is a brewery there as well. A Methodist minister, after moving there, established a small brewery. After the death of the owner, Buckley gained possession of the brewery and changed its name to Buckley's. So in 1998, the brewery was bought by Brains Brewery and transferred production of its facility to Cardiff. So there's leisure and tourism, there's a rugby stadium, an old castle works leisure village, and a national hunt racecourse. There's clearly community, there's golf, there's media, there's local attractions and leisure, but this just, I don't know, it's Yeah, I was going to stay there 2 days and ended up just thinking no. So clearly there was just something in me and what I did and didn't resonate with was going on. So now we're on the Lanelli to Carmarthen stretch.